Is that any better?
Perfect. Okay. So that was, let's hope that's the extent of our technical challenges for this evening. So first of all, I would like to welcome everybody to this IDP Chair Candidate virtual forum that we'll be hosting tonight that the Disability Caucus of the Iowa Democratic Party is hosting this evening. I do want to make note and mention to everyone here on the call that in addition to Disability Caucus members, we have State Central Committee members, we have allies, advocates, we have other interested Democrats, and we have members from the National Federation of Democratic Women, as well as from the National Association of Democratic Disability Caucus members and DNC members and press on the phone this evening with us. So I just wanted to let everybody know that everyone here is welcome and what the format for this evening is going to be. Each chair candidate will be given 3 minutes to give an introduction. We're doing everything alphabetically. Then we will go into the question and answer portion of the forum. Before each question, a number of minutes will be given and allotted to each one. It will be the same amount to each one of the participants, and there will be a timer. So we need to really stick to that time. In the end, we will go by reverse alphabetical order, and each speaker will have 2 minutes to give their closing remarks. So for right now, I would like to turn it over to Andrea Phillips, our acting IDP chair. Thank you, Andrea.
You're welcome. Thank you. Many of you know that I'm normally the first vice chair of the IDP, and as Catherine said, for the next 5 days, the acting chair. But what many of you may not know is that I have a son who is 13 years old who has mild cerebral palsy. He was born 8 weeks early, and he walks independently now, but he wears ankle orthotics or braces. But he was in a walker until he was 5, and so I spent many years, as many of you are familiar with, looking around for the nearest cutout in the curb or accessible door or finding out where the elevators were. And so I'm familiar with what those struggles are like, and also the social side of having a child who was not able to keep up with his friends on the playground. And during that time, I came across a book by a woman called Kathy Snow. It's Kathie Snow. And in that book, she said that 1 in 5 Americans has a disability. And if that's the case, then isn't disability part of the normal human condition? And her book is called Disability is Natural, and it's geared, I think, more for parents of small children, but it is a good book, so I'd encourage you guys to check it out if you're interested. And with that, I will turn it back over to Catherine, but not before thanking her for her tireless work on behalf of the disabled community, not just in Iowa, but throughout the U.S. So thank you, Catherine.
Thank you very much. I would like to now introduce our 3 candidates for IDP chair who are with us this evening. Bob Krause, Troy Price, and Julie Stauch. We'll start now with Bob. Bob, you have 3 minutes for your introduction. Go right ahead.
Thank you so much, Catherine. The first thing I'd like to talk about is my connection with the disabled community. When I was in the legislature, I was the one that created the regional public transit system, the demand response vehicles that many persons with disabilities rely on. Lately, for the last 7 years now, I've also been president of the Veterans National Recovery Center, and we work with disabled.
Bob, I think we've lost you. Okay, so Bob was calling in on a cell phone, so once I see him come back on, we'll go back to him. Let's go on to Troy, please. Troy, go ahead, and I'll start the timer over again. You have 3 minutes.
Catherine. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to this forum this evening to share our views about the future of the party. And I really do want to thank you and everyone with the Disability Caucus for the work that you folks are doing every day to break down barriers and make our state move our state forward. So I really do appreciate the work that you folks are doing. As Catherine said, my name is Troy Price, and I'm running to be the next chair of our Iowa Democratic Party. I am proud to be a Democrat. I'm proud to be a Democrat because our party has been the driver of social and economic change for the last 80 years. I am proud to be a Democrat because this is the party that gives a voice to those who don't have one. I am proud to be a Democrat because this is the party that said to me as an 18-year-old gay kid from rural Iowa that I do in fact belong in this society, that I should be treated no differently than anyone else. I am proud to be a Democrat, but I am frustrated by where our party is today. We have lost the trust of the very people that we are trying to help. Our message is stale and fractured, and we rely too much on antiquated processes and ideas. But the good news is, we have the tools we need to be successful in 2018 at our disposal right now. An unpopular GOP president, a GOP that is actively trying to shove our country backwards, an energized activist, volunteer, and donor base means that we have the tools we need to be successful. But we will only be successful if our party is strong. And the next chair of our party must be able to start on day one moving our party forward. And that is why I am running for chair. Because I believe that I have the experience, commitment, and passion to not only get the job done, but to get the job done starting on day one. I have been a previous executive director of the Iowa Democratic Party, where I put together an $8 million coordinated campaign and was successful in protecting Iowa's first in the nation's caucuses by creating new ways to expand participation. I have worked for 2 Democratic governors, putting together successful message campaigns that have created sweeping policy changes throughout the state. I have worked on several statewide campaigns, building relationships from one corner of the state to the other with donors, activists, and volunteers, and would look to utilize those relationships starting immediately. Our party faces challenges, but I know we can meet them together. I know we can because of the great work that this caucus is doing, that our other identity caucuses are doing, and that Democrats are doing from one corner of the state to the other. I ask for your support so that together we can achieve great things for the Iowa Democratic Party. We can create a message that brings new people into our party and fights for the progressive issues that define us. We can build the trust between all wings of our party to show that we are united to fight. We can start organizing now in diverse communities and end the cycle of turning up just a couple of months before the election. We can achieve a party that is fully inclusive and breaks down the systemic barriers to participation. We can support our caucuses and work to give them the tools, resources, funding, and staff support they need to be successful. Quite frankly, we can reach what is our ultimate goal, that we can win up and down the ticket in 2018. I know we can do this. I know we can do this together. And that is why I am asking for your support. Thank you again for giving us this opportunity this evening, and I look forward to the conversation. Bob Krause.
Thank you very much, Troy. Bob, I see that you have joined us again. You were about 30 seconds in, so I'm going to set the timer at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. 30 seconds prior to the end of your time, you will hear that high tone, and then you'll hear it again at the end of your tone, at the end of your talk. So go ahead.
Okay. I'm not really quite sure where I broke off on that. As I said, though, I am a friend of the persons with disabilities. My bill to create the regional transit system that many disabled people rely upon passed the Iowa legislature back in the 70s. And it's still a backbone for disabled transportation. More recently, with the Veterans National Recovery Center, I've worked directly as an advocate for persons with disabilities, with post-traumatic stress disorder, with traumatic brain injury, with military sexual trauma, and other disabilities, and I have been a very successful advocate at that. When I become an advocate for the Iowa Democratic Party, I will have a special place in my heart for the persons with disabilities, because I've done so much, and I do have a great deal of empathy for the problems that come with the loss of mobility, the loss of speech, the loss of other attributes that people that do not have these have to struggle through. For what I foresee as the chair of the IDP, I foresee my role as being the bad cop and the advocate. I'm the bad cop in that I point at the Republicans here in the state, and I do that very well. I've got 35,000 Twitter followers. On Facebook, I've had Facebook posts that have gone as many as 20,000 views on videos. I know how to do that game. And then, because we do not have a governor candidate yet, I become the advocate for the governor candidate, whoever that is. And that kind of sets the stage so the governor candidate is free to maneuver politically, and I can take the heat for that. And so that's part of my platform. I'd like to talk more, but obviously I can't. So please ask some questions. I'll be looking forward to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie, same thing applies. I'll set the timer for 3 minutes. You'll hear one loud tone at 30 seconds left, and then you'll hear another tone. Go ahead.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you to the caucus for hosting this meeting that we're having. I basically want to talk with you about first the opportunities, then the challenges we face, and then my experience. As far as opportunities, in 2010, the Republicans brought back Terry Branstad because they couldn't unite their warring factions. Now he's gone, and I believe that that's an opportunity for us, and that their divisions are great and deeply entrenched in the organization. We are seeing right now the legislative version of rape and pillage from the Republican majorities in the Iowa legislature and in the U.S. Congress. We have to make them own those. And that is an opportunity for us. Our base is enraged and engaged, and we just need to invite and empower them to work on behalf of Democrats, both in our county parties and on behalf of our candidates. That is a huge opportunity. The challenges we face is we do need to raise a lot of money. The next chair will need to do that. Probably at least $4 million by next spring, so that we can help our candidates leverage that national money for the coordinated campaign. I commit to doing the work of raising the money, and I'm going to focus on renewing our club memberships because those are down from their peak years, and I believe there's a lot of opportunity there for us to both expand our base of support and increase the resources we have available. I'm also going to ask those who donate this year to pledge to give for the next 4 years. Because quite honestly, it's not just this year that matters, it's the next 4 years. And so we really need to focus there. We need to address the health of our grassroots organizations. Our county parties, our district parties, and our constituency caucuses. And what I want to do, there's some barriers that are in place. I want to break those down and increase the exchange of information and ideas. And basically, if we do that, we can help people find solutions that fit them from other counties. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Lastly, under our challenges, we need to establish a permanent progressive table in the state. We do not have one, and most of the state parties around the country do. And we have it during our coordinated campaign, but we don't have it year-round, and I believe we need it year-round. My experience, 11 years as a member of the Sarasota County Democrats in Mason City. I've run 3 congressional races. I was the Chief Public Affairs Officer for Planned Parenthood of the Heartland. And more importantly, for the last 5 years, I've been hired by organizations to help them implement change. And I think that's the most valuable thing that I bring to this race and to the party. And I look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you, Julie. Okay, so we will go on to our first question, and this first question will start with Troy. Troy, and you will have 1 minute to answer the question. I think it's pretty straightforward. So the question is, what is your opinion regarding the IDP's obligation to comply with the ADA as amended, and what implications do you believe that position has for the county parties? Go ahead, Troy.
that. I was on mute. Sorry about that. No, the Iowa Democratic Party has to fully comply with the ADA. There's just no question about that. We are the party of Tom Harkin, and so we absolutely have to comply with the ADA and do everything in our power to make sure we are fully compliant. And that extends not just at the state level, but also at the district county level. We need to work with our county parties. They are separate entities, of course. They're separate organizational entities. But, I mean, that's the obligation of the Iowa Democratic Party to make sure that they have the tools, resources, training, et cetera, to make sure that they fully understand what the ADA is and how they can comply with it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Julie. You'll be next.
Well, we definitely need to fully comply, but I also think we want to comply. We want to make our everything more accessible for any person who wants to participate in the party, because we need everyone that we can, and we don't want any artificial barriers to be getting in the way of access for any of the party members.
Thank you. Bob, go ahead.
Well, the key to all this is the Iowa Precinct Caucus. That's at the bottom level, and that's where we will be looked at the hardest by the entire nation. So we have to make sure that people that do have disabilities have full access. That may come from electronic precincts. That may come from disabled demand response vehicles picking people up, but it's something that I think will take a special task force to put together with the Disabilities Caucus to figure out quite how to do it. There's a lot of mechanics, and we have county parties out there with various levels of skills, but we need to do it for the precinct caucuses. Those are coming up in about 3 years, and we should have a fully developed and practiced plan by then. And that, I think, is critical for us to keep our first in the nation status, as well as to serve our disabled.
Thank you. Our second question is going to first go to Julie. In your past experience, can you give us an example of when you have led a team or organization through a needed cultural shift, and how did you go about creating the necessary change? You'll have 2 minutes to answer the question.
Well, I've done that several times. Probably the best example is when one of my clients, the Water for Food Institute at the University of Nebraska, it was a startup organization, and they thought in their draft of their strategic plan that they knew what they would need to do, but they hired me to help them verify that. And I went out and had a number of individual conversations with faculty members and the interested parties, and it turned out that, in fact, the plan that they had was not what everyone thought they needed most. And to the credit of the organizational leaders, they changed right away, practically pivoted on a dime. And I think the real point of that lesson is leaders have to embrace the changes and the needed modifications in order to be able to achieve the results. Because I could have gone back, I've worked with other clients where I've gone back, given them the information, and they've just said, oh no, this can't be true, even though I had it documented. And they chose not to, and their efforts did not succeed because they did not listen to what the base was telling them and what they needed.
Okay, thank you. So next up would be Bob. Bob, go ahead. Same question.
I think the cultural change that I still face today is awareness of post-traumatic stress disorder. The people that have post-traumatic stress disorder are both military combat vets and run-of-the-mill citizens around Iowa. Spouses that have been beaten up by their spouses, people that have been in traffic accidents, people that have been robbed or have been in a violent crime. There's a lot of people out there with post-traumatic stress disorder. And there is, amongst the people in the military, a special denial of that. And it's hard to crack. And the only way you can do it is with public education. And that's why We put out press releases concerning post-traumatic stress disorder, the symptoms regarding it, and we try to build the awareness that there is a problem there. It's not just a person that's hiding their problem under alcohol or drugs or something like this. There is a real underlying problem that has to be addressed, and I think that's important for people in the disabilities community. It's obvious the Trump administration knows nothing about the people with disabilities just because of the way they're talking about Medicaid. They don't have the foggiest idea what's going on. We need to educate in that area, and that means bringing forth people from the Disabilities Caucus to talk about it.
Okay, thank you. Troy?
Thank you. Yeah, this is a great question, and I would actually point to my time when I was at the Iowa Democratic Party before. When I started, I held several meetings and conversations with state central committee members, identity caucus members, and all of them, and then also at the district and county level, and they all felt like they were not engaged in the party. So we set off on an effort to try and engage folks more, try and empower folks more to have more ownership over the party. And what we did was have more trainings for county parties. We empowered our SCC members and our district committee people to establish, to be both do train the trainer work for county chairs, and also to set up mentorship for new county chairs so that they can they would have a resource to rely upon within that entity. We also started the first steps of trying to get the different caucus groups of the state central committee to set out goals and start implementing those goals. Now, unfortunately, that work did not continue following our departure. It was, there were just challenges going into the caucus year, presidential caucus year, that prevented that from being sustainable. And one of the things that I would look to do is really try to make sure that this is sustainable change and that we can get sustainable empowerment of the various levels of the state party so that everyone feels fully invested in the work that is being done. And just to go back to, as part of this expansion effort, one of the things that we undertook, and I mentioned this before, was trying to expand the caucuses and expand participation in the caucuses. And so we took the first steps and made the first changes to the caucuses in 40 years while I was there.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next question, we will start out with Bob. And Bob, this one will go to you first. We have 2 minutes to answer it. What, if any, chasm do you see that exists within the party, and how do you plan to go about influencing SCC members, activists, and voters to keep their attention focused on what is in front of us instead of what is behind us? What specific steps would you take?
Well, one thing that I would really like to see that I still haven't seen is the LOPSEC study. That was to give us some focused ideas of what issues we all had in common. I think we can't unify without at least a central core of agreed to issues. Not very many, 2 or 3 that we can publicize, plus others that we can come to agreement on, but that we may not publicize so much. I think that's an important thing. I do see over the last 6 months or so of Derek's reign that I do believe that the friction between the so-called Bernie faction and the so-called Hillary faction have decreased significantly. I see people working together more, and I think that's a trend that can be encouraged by letting it all hang out when we have a disagreement. The chair internally has to be a neutral arbitrator and has to bring the disagreeing parties together, and that can be done fairly easily. That can be done in a closed office where you bring faction leaders together. That can be done out in the open by bringing people together so that they can talk in a conference style. Where I do identify these problems, I will work on them because I realize that we are the minority party in this state, and we're not going to get control unless we all are shooting in the same direction.
Thank you. Next up is Troy, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that there's still lingering mistrust within the party. Last cycle was it was a hard cycle, and those are wounds that sometimes take a long time to heal. When I was at the party 4 years ago, people were still coming to me and talking about Carter versus Kennedy in 1980. So, I'm aware that these things take time to heal. But how I think that we can get the focus more forward-looking and not necessarily looking back or focused on what happened last year is, one, we just need to acknowledge that this exists, that there are these challenges that still exist. Number two, I think that if there are issues of mistrust, that's the root of this problem, then what we need to do is really get people working together on projects and really get people working together on similar things, because if people are just sitting on the edges of the room and not talking to each other, we're never going to get beyond this. And so I think that we really, like, the specific things that the State Central Committee can model is working together and identifying different projects, and that includes caucus to convention work. It includes messaging and helping us develop our message for next cycle. It includes the different works that obviously are already taking place within the caucuses that are out there, and that is where you're seeing that these barriers are breaking down even quicker than it is in the party as a whole. The last thing I would say too is that we just need to accept that we need to have these conversations. I think that a lot of times we have been, as a party, too afraid to have the conversation, and we've let things linger, and we've let things linger out there. We need to not be afraid to have these conversations, and as chair, I would help to facilitate them, just as I've done throughout my career.
Okay, thank you, Troy. Julie, go ahead.
Well, this is a challenge of coalition politics at any time, and but I think it is particularly complicated by the fact that for the first time in a very long time last year, we had a caucus process that broke down to really two very strong candidates, and then a third candidate who certainly played in there, but it was not quite the same. And it was complicated by mistakes at the party, and whether intentional or unintentional, they didn't make things any better. So I think what we always have to do in those scenarios is step up and own those mistakes, talk about how we're not going to repeat them, and then find the common ground. And one of the things that I have seen work in groups that are tense is, and it's going to sound silly, but you like if as your chair, I will ask you, if elected on Saturday, I'm going to ask you guys all to take a month and fake it, or 3 months actually, and fake it, and pretend like you love and respect every person in that room, and so that we can really focus on the work that needs to be done. And I know it sounds silly on one level, but on another level, it really does help people to just find ways to work beyond things. They're not going to ever be best friends unless another campaign comes along where they actually do work together. But what it does is help us find the common ground and allow us to refocus on the 2018 elections, which are critical.
Thank you, Julie. This question is going to go to Troy. You have 1 minute. Currently, there is an amendment to our FCC bylaws on the table to grant full participation in FCC meetings by allowing members to attend the meetings via electronic means with full participation. What is your position on this proposed amendment?
I'm in favor of this amendment. I believe that we should have full participation of the State Central Committee. The one thing, though, I will also say, though, is that conversations are really good when they are had in person as well. And I would want to encourage folks as much as possible to be able to attend in person, because I think that we really need to have, have face-to-face conversations are also very helpful. I fully understand, though, that some people have challenges, whether it comes to jobs or mobility challenges or whatever, that prevent them from participating. And obviously, we need to make sure that we are fully accessible.
Okay, thank you, Julie.
Well, overall, I agree with the amendment. The only challenge that I see is one of our struggles that we face as a party is we really have not done a good job of, we've lost touch with keeping our relationships, and it is easier to maintain relationships when you sort of have a face-to-face with people. I don't think we should penalize someone for not being at a meeting, but I do think we should encourage everyone to be there, because you really do get to know people in a very different way when you're in the same room with them. So that's where I am on it.
Thank you. Bob, go ahead.
Well, I've had experience when I was chair of the Iowa Democratic Veterans Caucus. We did it all three ways. Early on, we did it where it was just the people that were there. Then we had some meetings that they were a teleconference like this, and then we had mixed meetings where we had people in attendance, plus we had people calling in on the telephone, and all three worked. I think the big thing is technology, training on technology. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question here is going to go to Julie to start out. In Iowa, our First in the Nation caucuses, here in Iowa, we have our First in the Nation caucuses, and we're in a unique position of being able to be the focus of national and international media attention. We see this as an opportunity for the cultivation of external partnerships to build the state party into the leading state Democratic organization in the U.S. Would you consider this a priority? And if you do, how would you accomplish it? You have 3 minutes to answer.
Yes, it is a priority for us to continue the First in the Nation caucuses. It's a combination of things as to how we continue it. First of all, we have some people already on the State Central Committee who have been working on this for a number of years. I would work with them to make sure that we are approaching this effort in a way that is in harmony with the work that has already been done. Secondly, I would reach out to other DNC members and leaders around the country and visit with them about their concerns regarding the caucuses and how we could work together in order to get their support for it. It used to be that the Rules Committee decided, and it was just sort of a blanket approval from the DNC, and as I understand it now, it is not just a blanket approval of what the Rules Committee does. So it's going to be real important that we not only work closely with the Rules Committee as we did when I was doing the caucus to convention rules in the 90s, but now we must work with all the members of the DNC and really make sure that they understand both the value of the caucuses to Iowa, but also the value of the caucuses to the party, and why it's a great idea for it to continue here. And frankly, I think that's because we don't have enough delegates to make a formal decision, so that allows many more states to have an impact in the decision-making process, as we have seen these last couple presidential cycles.
Thank you. Next up would be Bob. Go ahead, 3 minutes.
Thank you. What I see on this is, of course, it's a critical thing for Iowa. The technologies, the focus that's come to important, of course, is probably the New Hampshire Alliance, that we have their blessings, and then we have the states around us in our the immediate Midwest area that get additional coverage. Where our opposition is going to come from are some of the larger states that see this as a financial panacea. The one thing that happened last time that it got kind of dicey, and that was, I can't remember, I think it was maybe about, maybe it was before Obama came in, but there were many states that tried to go after this, and they kept moving the dates up and moving the dates up to try to squeeze Iowa. And Florida, I believe, lost their delegation accreditation for a while over it. We have to make sure that people know that if we lose out, it's going to be a real catfight at the time where the the National Democratic Party does not need a catfight. So I think, three things. We need to reform our rules desperately to have maximum accommodation of everybody. We need to develop our alliances where the natural ones as they lie, and we need to remind people what happens if they turn over the apple cart. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Go ahead, Troy.
Thank you. Yes, protecting the Iowa's First in the Nation status is one of the fundamental jobs that the state chair and the state party has to do. The Iowa caucuses, when you actually look at the work that the Iowa caucuses have done to help grow our party across the state, across the state over the last 40 years, I mean, the work has been tremendous. You get, presidential campaigns coming in here, spending millions of dollars, building organizations that, continue once they leave. And so, protecting Iowa's First in the Nation status is critical for us as a party to make sure that we remain strong and vibrant going forward. I have worked to try and protect Iowa's First in the Nation status before. In 2013, there were efforts by the DNC to tell us that we had to make changes to the caucuses, and that is why we looked at participation expansion efforts, such as we created a telecaucus for military families and military members. We created satellite caucuses that allowed us to allow places where folks, whether shift workers or folks who had mobility issues, could apply and hold a separate caucus that would have been just for them. Those efforts were okay. We need to do more. They weren't as successful last cycle as I think they could have been. The reality is this, though. The caucuses are probably facing their greatest threat that they've faced in probably 20 years. The Unity Commission right now is planning to meet in August. They're continuing to meet and will prepare a report that will then be used by the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee to craft the rules going into the 2020 cycle. So we need to make sure that we are at the forefront of that. We need to not be afraid to have conversations about absentee participation in the caucuses. We need to not be afraid to have conversations about how we expand technology and move this process into the 21st century. We need to not be afraid to have strong conversations about proxy voting or different ways that we can have, that people can have their voices heard in this process, but may not be able to participate for whatever reason. But we need to be figuring out how to make our caucuses more accessible, and by doing so, that's going to ensure that Iowa maintains its First in the Nation status. And Bob is correct. We do need to be building those alliances. I've worked with the chair of the New Hampshire Party before, not the DNC, the chair of the New Hampshire Party before on some of these efforts, and he is still there. And I would, if elected next week, he'd be one of the first calls I make to make sure that we are protecting Iowa's caucuses.
Thank you. The next question, you'll have 1 minute to answer, and we are going to start off first with Julie. Currently, any meeting that is held telephonically at any level in the state party also has CART available. This has been the practice of the past two IDP chairs. They both ensured funds were available to provide this type of accommodation and access to participating in IDP-related meetings and events. Will you commit to ensuring that the funds remain available to allow for such participation, and that at no time will a person's right to participate in any meeting of the IDP be abridged because of the will of the majority? Go ahead. ahead, Julie.
Yes, I definitely will, and I actually would be looking at other ways that we could use CART to expand in some different ways. So yes.
Troy? Troy? We might have lost Troy for a second here. Bob?
Yes, I think that it's another one of those benchmark things that is not only important for persons with disabilities of different kinds, but it is also something that the national disability community is going to be watching very closely. If we alienate the national disability community through not pushing, we're going to feel it when the DNC votes. So we've got to push not only because it's right, but because it's practical.
Thank you. Troy, are you back with us?
Hey, can you hear me, Catherine?
Yes, now I can.
Okay. Yeah, I'm using CART right now, and I'm glad I am because I just got dropped off the call, and so I was able to see what the conversation was about. I think this is a great service. I think that we should have CART available for the meetings, for as much meetings as possible within the party, the State Central Committee for sure, and various other meetings of the state party. I'm going to work to make sure the resources are available to do that.
Thank you, Troy. The next question, you will have 2 minutes to answer. Do you have the necessary relationships within the DNC to accomplish the tasks of fundraising and ensuring our first-in-the-nation status? If so, what steps will you take to foster a good working relationship? Do you believe that regular attendance by the elected and appointed DNC members and IDP staff is necessary or essential? And we'll start this off with Bob. Go ahead, Bob. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, networking is something that everyone goes through. Of course, I do not have the national contacts that Troy does, and Troy has some excellent contacts. But I've been in environments where I've had to break in, and I can break in. Usually, it just entails making sure that you're around before or after the meeting, so you can make the small talk, that you can build those networks, and every time we have a meeting, we should be represented, hopefully by the same person, but sometimes that there is shifting. But we do need to develop those better than they are today. I think that but one way we can do that is we can show that we have a strong local fundraising effort. We've gone after big contributors a lot. We need to go. Honestly, the guy that really showed how we can get small contributions was Bernie Sanders. He did an excellent job, and so did Hillary. But the small contributions are the ones that will win for us in the end. They are the ones that build a base so that you can ask for a match. They are the ones that build an enthusiasm down at the grassroots, and that's the direction we need to go in order to create the big base. Are you there? Or am I out?
Thank you. Next up is Julie.
Great question. Thank you. I'm going to go to the steps part first, because from my experience running congressional races, I had to work with the DCCC and also frequently with Emily's List. And I want to share a little bit about my experience doing that and what I learned. The national organizations that we end up working with, they want us to be proactive in communicating with them and keeping them informed on what's going on here on the ground in such a way that they can have confidence that we're doing what needs to be done. And I have a very strong track record doing that with the different leaders. Secondly, the leadership of the DNC, just like our party leadership changed last year, so did the leadership of the DNC. So there are many new relationships to be cultivated, whether they're on the Central Committee itself or whether they're with the staff. There's always turnover every election year cycle, and so I would certainly work to make that.
Thank you. Go ahead, Troy.
So, related to the DNC, I have, building relationships with the DNC is critical. I have some good relationships with individual DNC members as it currently stands. The new administration, I don't have strong relationships with, but I will say I am glad that we have a new administration, and the previous administration of the DNC, I'm glad to see that there were changes made there because the DNC needed to have those changes made. It is critical that the chair and DNC representatives are at these meetings. We have to have those relationships. I mean, protecting Iowa's first in the nation status is critical as we've already talked about. So that means that it's all about building those relationships and building strong relationships. And the good news is we have, with our current DNC representatives, we have, some longevity on the committee that can help us that have some established relationships. But as chair, I would certainly work to build strong relationships with the DNC as it is. The other piece of that, though, that I would say is when you're talking about the DNC, I don't know if you're talking about just the DNC or if you're talking about the different Democratic committees that fall underneath the DNC, like the DCCC, the DSCC, etc. I've had to work with those committees in the past. I've had to fight with those committees in the past. I don't know anyone who's at those committees now, but I'll tell you this, that I am tired of Iowa getting railroaded by those outside committees. And as chair, I will fight back tooth and nail against any effort for them to try and put in some cookie-cutter campaign in Iowa and make sure that we are running a homegrown campaign here at Iowa.
Okay, thank you. So next up, kind of piggybacking on the idea of relationships and fundraising, tell us about a time that you needed to raise very large sums of money. How did you go about doing that? How much did you raise? And what, if anything, would you do differently? And I think what we'll do is we'll start with Julie on that. And sorry, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. When I worked at Planned Parenthood of the Heartland, we needed to have a program, expand our program greatly when I arrived there. And so I sat down and talked with people and then put together a plan for what was critical for our future. And I worked with our CEO, who then identified a donor, and we both went and presented to the donor. And we were able to raise $6.4 million on behalf of the organization to do a wide variety of communication and organizing work, legislative organizing work. And so that's one example. What would I do differently? Well, what I would keep from it is the fact is that money follows vision, and the reason we were able to successfully raise the money is because we had a well-thought-out plan that the donors looked at and said, yes, this makes sense to us, and we want to support this. And I think that's very true for us, whether we're talking to club members or whether we're talking to large donors. We are talking about, we need to be able to tell people what is the work we're doing and why that work is critical. As far as other things that I would do differently, I understand there's a grant process available from the DNC this year, and that's very exciting. And because I have a lot of grant writing experience, I would want to lend my experience to that effort. And lastly, the most important thing you can do is you have to ask people. You have to make the calls, sit down and have all the conversations. With some people, it's one conversation, but with other people, it's multiple conversations. And you just have to be willing to invest the time and energy into giving them the confidence that what you're going to do
is an investment that they want to make. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Bob.
I guess probably proportionately the most successful fundraising event that I was involved in was back in it was quite a few years ago when I ran for treasurer of state, which is Mike Fitzgerald's been that for many years. I ran right before he won, and I raised more money than any candidate for treasurer of state in history at that time. I did have very good connections because I was still in the legislature. I knew a lot of people, but what it took to get that money was telephoning. Lots of telephoning. Today, of course, we're transitioning to a new technology, and that there's different ways to do things. And I think the social media was pretty much where the candidates got their small contributions. Sometimes we ask for too much money to get people in the door. I think with the Sanders thing and with Hillary, it was around $3 was the entry point. The idea being that you get them and then you get them to give again and again and again, so that at the end of the day, you've got a big money and you've got a growing commitment. And part of that commitment is the message. You have to create an attractive message, and why it helps. You can't just say, we're Democrats, we're proud of it. You've got to work on that message.
Okay, thank you. Troy?
So I would point to a time when, the question is a time when I've had to raise a large sum of money. I would point to the 2014 coordinated campaign. Now, that was the largest non-presidential coordinated campaign our state's ever put together, state parties ever put together, of either party. It was an $8 million program. How we did that was first starting off with our campaign partners and working with them to identify what they were willing to invest. Then I had to go out and personally raise, I believe I raised, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but it was between $600,000 and $800,000 from various organizations that were willing to invest. Those are organizations like the Teamsters, AFSCME, ISEA, some of our labor partners that were out there, as well as non-labor partners. We had some from the environmental community and others who were willing to stand up and put money into the coordinated campaign. There are a lot of things that I would change about the coordinated campaign itself, and I learned a lot from that cycle. But in terms of the fundraising, we had I'm not sure I would change a lot about that particular fundraising effort, just because it was successful in raising the money that we needed that cycle. We could always use more, but we certainly, like I said, it was the largest amount we've ever raised in a non-presidential year. But in terms of what I would look to do in the fundraising realm in general, I agree with what Bob and Julie have said. The reality is that the donor base of the Iowa Democratic Party is shrinking, and it's been shrinking for quite a while. This is a long-term problem. The party has not invested enough in growing the base and identifying new donors and moving them up the ladder of donation, and instead folks are passing away or leaving the party. We need to do a better job working with counties and others to grow that base, and so that is what I would do as chair.
Thank you. The next question is the following. The Disability Caucus is in the final stages of finishing the best practices for meetings and events to ensure the broadest audience possible, aligning ourselves with inclusion as one of our democratic principles. Will you support its distribution and use? And we'll start with Bob.
I couldn't hear the last part of that question.
I said, will you support its distribution and use?
Oh, absolutely. That kind of ties in with what I was talking about earlier, where we need to have the Disabilities Caucus as within the planning process to make sure we have full access to the precinct caucuses. This fits right in with it, and I'd be very pleased and proud to work with the
Troy?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think we should be doing more best practice work and establishing this, and I think this is one of the key roles that the caucuses can play. And so I am very happy to hear that you folks have undertaken this effort and are doing that. I'd be happy to help champion that with folks across the state and work with them on how to best implement it.
Thank you. Julie?
My answer is definitely yes. I also realized that I didn't answer part of the last question, so I want to take this extra time and go back to that, because I didn't say specifically how much I raised in that grant effort, and it was $6.4 million, and it was over 2 years. So I do think that's important to know that figure. But yes, absolutely, we need to do the distribution on the Disability Caucus best practices. And I agree with Troy. Any other best practices we develop, these are not deep dark secrets we should be keeping. I think we should be sharing and increasing transparency in every aspect of our work.
Okay, thank you. Could you please give us an example of when you have had an uncomfortable but necessary conversation with a subordinate or peer regarding their unacceptable behavior, and what was the result? We'll start with Bob, and you have 1 minute.
Well, there's been a number of them. One that comes to mind was I had a secretary, and she kind of fell apart. And what it was her husband had skipped out on her, and the marriage was in jeopardy, and so she was a nervous wreck. And what I did at that, when I found out what it was, I gave her grace, and fortunately she got through it, and the marriage was saved, and she went back to being a productive worker. I think what that does, it points to that when there are performance issues, sometimes unless you ask, you do not know what is causing that. It is much better to save an employee that is good, that is trained, and has lost a touch than it is to fire. Nobody likes to fire. It becomes a simple solution, but I tend to be one that will look at that very closely and work through all alternatives before I go to firing.
Okay, thank you. Julie?
Well, having managed so many people over the years, I've often had to do this, and I find the best thing to do is when you identify a problem to sit down and start the discussion with the person. I try to start it informally, and then if that doesn't work, then we go to a more formal process where you spell out specifically what the expectations are of the person and how how you need to work together. And you also make it clear that what role I would play in providing additional information to them to help them succeed. The most uncomfortable conversation I ever had was on a campaign in Hawaii, where we hired a finance director basically to help our candidate with her fundraising, and he arrived and came to work the first day and then went AWOL, and then came back a third day, then went AWOL, and after 7 days of work, I sat him down and I said very directly to him, you are perilously close to losing your job because, and I spelled out, he wasn't showing up for work, he wasn't, the things he wasn't delivering on. And so then we moved forward, and 7 days later, he had missed 4 out of the 7 days of work. So I sat him down again, and I said, I'm sorry to do this, but as of today, you are being dismissed from this campaign. And he acted shocked. And I actually, when you do those kind of startled laughs, I actually laughed at him and I said, what was it about perilously close? You didn't understand 7 days ago. I mean, so that was very uncomfortable. But it was, my job is always to work on behalf of the organization.
or in the case of a campaign, the candidate that I'm working for, and to make leadership decisions that are in their best interest. So as the leader of the Iowa Democratic Party Central Committee, I will be looking at making decisions that are in the best interest of all of our committee and not just, basically letting people get away with underperformance and or any other kind of problem.
Thank you. Troy, go ahead.
As someone who has managed, hundreds of people over the course of my career, I've certainly had to have my fair share of uncomfortable conversations. The way I believe that it should be approached is, number one, right from the beginning of the job, lay out what clear expectations are, and make sure they know what they are and that they're expected to live up to them. Number two, if someone is failing to live up to those expectations, start a process and have a meeting with them to begin that process. And if they still continue to work or fail to live up to those expectations, put them on a performance improvement plan. If that doesn't work, then go through the process necessary that could eventually lead to termination. Never been afraid to make the hard choices. The reality is that the work that has to get done at the Iowa Democratic Party right now, we don't have time to wait. We don't have time to wait for this stuff to get going. We have to hit the ground running. We have to make sure everyone is pushing in the right direction, and we will, more than happy to work with folks to make sure that they are helping us do that. But if folks are unable to do it, we'll make the hard choices necessary to do that.
Okay, thank you. The next question has to do with administrative support. What administrative support do you plan on providing the caucuses? Examples of support include sharing listservs, emailing to potential activists not on lists to assist with getting the word out about our event or activity, providing marketing support, providing business cards, leave-behinds, etc. What thought have you given to this, and what would you prepare to support the caucuses in 1 minute? And we will start with I'm losing track of my 1s, 2s, and 3s. I'm sorry. So I think
I started the last one, Catherine.
Right. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So why don't we go ahead and have Bob start this next round?
How many minutes for this one?
Just one.
Just one. Okay. Let's see. I think that in terms of support, the key thing that we've already got a great deal of money invested in is the list. And when I was the IDVC chair, we had a remarkable list of veterans that the John Kerry campaign put together, and we were able to use it to rapidly build the IDVC. So in fact, that, because it was an early caucus, became the state model for caucuses. When I went back several years ago, or less than that, a couple of years ago, and got that same state party list, there were only 30 veterans on it. And there's a tremendous amount of money expended and volunteer time expended to perfect those lists, and it just wasn't getting into the system. I would put top emphasis on making sure that persons with disabilities are identified on the voter list if they wanted to within the van, and so that there can be a general email call as well as the work you do so well with Facebook and all that. I think getting that listserv up and running so you can shoot out emails so that you can do other things to contact persons with disabilities is key.
Hey, Troy.
So what I would do is look to leverage, obviously, try to leverage the resources of the state party to support our caucuses. One of my goals is to hire additional organizers across the state, one for each congressional district. What we would then do as part of their portfolio, in addition to organizing counties, they would also serve as liaisons to a handful of the different identity caucuses out there, so that there is a direct staff link that is dedicated to individual caucuses. Secondly, in terms of one of the other things I think we can do is help make the caucuses more self-sufficient, and by that I mean utilizing the fundraising resources of the state party. We know how to put together events, hold fundraisers, etc., send out fundraising emails, raise funds into the party that can be used for specific programming within the caucuses. So, Catherine, you mentioned specifically business cards or literature or things like that. Help work with the caucuses to raise the funds necessary to provide those different resources there. So those would be the steps I would take. Long and short of it is the state party should be there to be supporting our different identity caucuses as much as possible, and that would happen under my administration should I win next week.
Thank you. Julie?
I just want to clarify, the caucuses you're referring to are the constituency caucuses, or are you referring to the presidential caucuses?
No, the constituency caucuses, the direct support from the IDP, yeah.
Right, okay, very good. Thank you for clarifying that. I think that there are a number of ways that we could provide administrative support, and I think it makes a lot of sense. These various caucuses, we were all on Troy and I were on the Black Caucus call earlier tonight, and clearly they're doing a great job in their organizing work and in their outreach, but they too brought up the need for more assistance in order to help expand their reach, and we want them to expand their reach just like we want every one of those caucuses to do so. So I would definitely support that. I think it would have to be, there would have to be a position to do that, but then we'd also have to look at, a space on our line items for some of those materials that you're talking about.
Okay, so I think I do want to follow up on this because this is really critical, and it support allows us to be effective with outreach, which is considered to be one of our primary responsibilities in terms of being a caucus. It's not just to hold meetings, it's to be activists, to be out there, to be in the community, and to do outreach. And I know our frustration, at least in the Disability Caucus, and I've heard it from other caucuses as well, is we have staff up there at the IDP. What we're looking for in some ways is kind of being overthought by some of the answers I've heard. We're looking for just simple things like, could you please email me the listserv of all of the State Central Committee members in an Excel spreadsheet? Could you please email me the press contacts? Could you please assist me with putting together a trifold marketing brochure? Could you send out this advertisement for a particular IDP event to all of the listservs? Could you have the communications director help us? Could you have somebody who's in charge of your data provide us with a list, et cetera, et cetera? It is more immediate. It's not something that can wait until there's a bunch more folks hired and things of that nature. These things are immediate and have been needed for the past year. So I'm going to give everybody 30 seconds to respond to this immediacy. It's just about having an IDP staff member up there at the IDP respond to it. So, Julie, I'll start with you and I'll go backwards then. So, Julie?
Okay. Yeah, sure. So now, thank you for clarifying that, because that's not what I heard when you first spoke. So I do appreciate that. I think there's I personally have a professional standard that I've held throughout my career, no matter how large the event I'm working on or campaign, that we be responsive to people the same day they reach out to us. And I would like to see that. I would, as chair, I would enforce that, and in the organization of the party, because people can't be calling and wondering if they're ever going to get their call returned. They can't be putting out a request and wondering when it will ever happen, if it will ever happen. So it's critical that we be responsive. That's part of building trust amongst people and amongst all our various members and groups. So, absolutely, yes, that needs to occur. And I thank you for that clarification, Catherine.
Thank you. Troy, go ahead. Troy?
Sorry, I was on mute again. Sorry I wasn't more clear about that earlier. I just made the assumption that was already happening, because that is what the Iowa Democratic Party is supposed to be doing, particularly the staff side of it. It's supposed to be providing those resources. One of the reasons why I want to hire additional organizers and assign those organizers to specific caucuses, so that there is that direct connection, a more direct connection there, liaison with the staff. But absolutely, we should be providing lists, sending out press contacts, putting stuff on Facebook, etc. That stuff should just be happening automatically, and if it's not happening now, it's definitely going to happen if I am elected chair next week.
Thank you. And no, it is not happening, to both you and Julie's point. Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, when I was the IDVC chair, we did have a designated contact that showed up at every single meeting we had. His name was, I believe it was Jesus Estrada, and he acted as a coordinator. He'd go back with our stuff, and he'd find the appropriate staff people, and he'd talk to the executive director and make sure that our needs were serviced. And that was why we got such quick and good access to the van, and we were able to shoot out as a single caucus. We had, I think it was like 75 or 100,000 veterans on that list, and we were able to basically spam them all, and it was because of his coordination. Things were a little simpler in those days, and that was all we asked for. One last alibi, if I could. The answering at 244-7292 needs to be a live person. They've got an automatic Centrix there or something like that, where you got to know which person you're going to dial them. It's not working. You can't get phone calls returned. We need a live person on the telephone when you call 244-7292.
Okay, thank you. And our final question. Taking a look back, what is your view on the major shortcomings of the caucus to convention cycle in 2016? And have you given any thought as to what specifically you will do differently in 2018? Troy, go ahead. Oh, 2 minutes. Sorry.
Sorry about that. I was on mute again. I think the biggest shortcoming of last year's caucuses was a lack of training, and that was the lead up to the caucuses, and then post caucuses, I think the biggest problem was just there was a great deal of mistrust between the different campaigns going through that process, and those are the big challenges that I think we're facing there. And I worked pretty hard. I actually worked with Blair Lawton. I was on the Clinton side, he was on the Sanders side, and we worked together very closely during the run-ups to particularly the state convention to make sure that things move smoothly there. Going into 2018, what I think it is, what I would for the caucuses there, number one, training. And making sure that all the caucus chairs know exactly what to expect. Number two, I would point to making sure that we are prepared in terms of materials. Three, I would want to take a look at doing some pilot projects when it comes to electronic poll books or other things that could make it easier and more accessible for us at the caucuses. Four, 4, I want to make sure all of our caucus sites in 2018 are accessible, fully accessible to everyone. And then 5, there's a lot of things that I'd want to do, particularly as it relates to the conventions, that in terms of just some of the processes there and clarifying some of it, because the rules we need to clarify at the state convention in 2018. A lot of the rules that are vague in our state constitution that governs the state, district, and county conventions, we need to clarify those before we get to 2020.
Okay, thank you. Julie?
Yes, there's quite a lot. Probably I'll run out of time, but in the last cycle, we had people doing caucus training who had never been to a caucus themselves. And because of that, they were focusing on the wrong things. For those of us who've been to caucus before, I would like to go to the training to refresh my experience and to also find out if there are any changes that have been made. The materials that we got were not very good. The lists were not thorough. We had at least 75 people at our caucus. One of them was an 82-year-old woman who had lived in her home the last 30 years, the same home, and she wasn't on the list. That shouldn't happen. And the other thing that our materials lacked for caucus prep were just some basics about how to set up your caucus site. In fact, when the Polk County Democrats did a review, I offered a diagram. I mean, I have lots of years of event planning experience, so I offered a diagram about how you set up your check-in and how many people you need for different number level of attendance so that it could apply to various sized caucuses. We definitely did not have enough materials. We were very proactive at our caucus. One of our team that worked on it at ours brought in a whole bunch of registration forms, and thank goodness she did, because we went through all the ones that were provided in the packets. As far as the caucus to convention rules, those will be reviewed and amended after we get the rules from the DNC. And when we're dealing with those, there's a lot that we really need to address. I think that we could look at opening up our platform in a lot of ways that we have not done previously. But now that we have technology, I believe there's a way that we can do it that would allow more Democrats to participate in our platform process. I think that there's a lot of refocusing that if we were able to do that, then we could speed up our convention process, our delegate selection process, and everybody wouldn't have to invest, anywhere from 12 to 24 hours in attending a convention. And that will help reduce tension. And lastly, I'll tell a quick story about we needed more training for people leading into the caucuses in 2016. So my husband and I hosted house parties every month where we played a bunch of different games to teach people the process. I would want to add caucus poker. It's actually kind of fun. You get cards that are dealt out, and whatever your hand, you have to figure out what your strategy is. A lot of people don't understand the strategies of caucus, and I would want to have more people informed on that, because caucus can actually be a lot of fun, and it doesn't have to be tedious. It can be fun, and you can and have a great time, and so I would want to do that as well.
Thank you, Bob.
I think the caucuses got off to a pretty rocky start in Fairfield, where I was picked the morning of to help run a caucus, and of course by that time there were no rules readily available for me to read. We got in there, and there was about 300 people, and we ran out of critical pieces of paper probably 3/4 through the process, and the gymnasium they had it in was actually a bit too small to manage that kind of a crowd in. If I had to do over again at that level, I would start the candidate or the caucus official recruitment process at least 1 to 2 months earlier than it has been done with sending papers out. You're probably going to have to start it. I'm saying before Thanksgiving, in order to, and then you're going to have to get those things in and do some call arounds to work the county chairs to make sure that all the positions are filled. You know, we've got a lot of novice county chairs out there also. We've had a huge turnover in county chairs this time around, and those people are the point people to make sure it all comes together. We need to crack the whip a little bit to make sure that the positions are filled in time so that we can have all this training stuff that we'd like to do.
Okay, thank you. So that concludes the forum part of this, and we will now go to the closing remarks by the candidates. I would like to thank everybody for signing up and participating in a variety of ways tonight on CART, on our Facebook live stream, on the visual interface, as well as on the telephone. I'd like to thank each one of our candidates, and a special thank you to Andrea Phillips, who has stepped in very unexpectedly in the last 3 weeks and stepped up to the challenge. So thank you very much for your support. Without further ado now, I'd like to go to the closing remarks of each one of the candidates. And I think what we'll do is we will go to Julie first, and everybody's agreed to 2 minutes. So we'll go Julie, Bob Troy.
Well, thank you very much for hosting this call tonight and the conversation. The questions were great. I'm sure people have more questions, and so please feel free to email me. I think that's posted in CART, and let me know any other questions you have, because I'm happy to answer those. I think my wrap-up comment is I do believe we have a lot of opportunities, and I believe that our opportunities these next 2 years are greater than our challenges. I believe we can win, and I believe that our shared values can unite us to move forward and really achieve a whole new approach for the Iowa Democratic Party that is a good bridge between where we've been and where we need to go. And I would love the opportunity to serve as the state chair and to do every minute of the work, crazy as it seems. I think it would be a lot of fun too, and I know that we can do this together. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Julie Stauch. Next, we'll go to Bob Krause.
Well, I too would like to thank the Disabilities Caucus for putting this on and asking really good questions and being so attentive. You folks are the backbone of what we need to have to see in this party if we're going to win in a landslide. And we do have an opportunity this year in 2018 and in 2020 because of what's going on to create that landslide. 2018 is a traditionally low turnout off year, and so we've got to get those people identified so we can get them out early. And that's what the state party chair and the state organization and the identity caucuses and the regional district central committee meetings, that's what it's all about, getting this big machine going. So not only do we take the natural wave, but we add the necessary 2 to 4 to 5% on top of that to make a real true landslide. That's what we have to do if we're going to take back all the ground that we've lost. And I'd like to thank Troy, and I'd like to thank Julie. I think they're very worthy and capable opponents, and I think they would do a wonderful job. Of course, I have my opinions that I would probably do a pretty good job too. But they're good people. We're all good people in this, and we're all fighting for to create our common goal and to achieve that common goal. So I'd like to thank you for your thoughts, your questions, and I'll once again with my email. I believe it's on the visual also, the visual and the telephone. So I'll be happy to take any calls or accept any emails. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And Troy Price, please. Troy, have you need to unmute yourself, Troy?
Sorry about that. I thought I did.
That's okay.
I want to thank Catherine and the Disability Caucus for hosting us this evening and giving us this forum, this opportunity to have this conversation. Some very important conversations. It was very good discussion, and as always, I learned a lot. I also want to thank Bob and Julie for their service to our party and for the work that they have done and will continue to do to help our party and to help grow our state. And I'm very humbled to be a part of this journey with them, and thank them for making the run that they're making. You know, our party does face some severe challenges right now. 10 years ago, Democrats were in one of the strongest positions they'd ever been, and now we are in one of our weakest. But, and you know, when you listen to TV, you'll hear people say, starting to write the obituary of the Democratic Party. Well, I reject that. I have nothing but eternal hope and optimism for what 2018 will bring. I have traveled this state for many years. I have seen the work and the dedication of the people of this party. I know that we have great people who are united and ready to go. All we need is to make sure that our party is strong and ready to go. And so I am asking for the support of the Disability Caucus, because I believe that together we can do some really great things. I believe that together we can rebuild this party. We can move this state forward. We can elect some strong progressives. It doesn't matter at what level of government, but we can elect strong progressives who are going to fight for the things that we believe in. I hope I get the chance to do that. I hope I get the opportunity to serve as your chair, because together I think we can do some great things. So thank you very much again for this opportunity. I'm not sure if my email's out there, but if it isn't, it's troy.m.price@gmail.com. Thanks again for this opportunity this evening, and I look forward to talking to everyone again real soon.
Thank you once again to everyone. Everyone who participated in this call will be receiving via email a Google survey for you to take, so you have an opportunity to give feedback about the forum and also vote for who you feel after listening to their answers, and perhaps also having one-on-one conversations with folks, who you feel should be our next IDP chair. Additionally, for those who are hearing this on the Facebook live stream, all you need to do is send us an email, idp.disabilitycaucus@gmail.com, and we will also send you a Google survey so that you can complete it as well. Once again, thank you very much. I was very proud, as was the Disability Caucus, to be able to host this forum and to be able to do it in the most accessible and inclusive way, which means that we had CART this evening. Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing us to go a little bit overtime here, and everyone have a good rest of your weekend. Thank you, and bye-bye.